Hello everyone, this is Dark Journalist. Tonight a very special interview with intuitive mystic Gigi Young. Gigi will go deep on the mystery school cosmology as an answer to the UFO file enigma and ancient Atlantis technology for soul ascension through the heavens. Please join us now.
Gigi, what I want to do, I have this really fascinating quote, which goes back to something you were saying about types of beings and how it's looked upon from a mystery school level. And this is very interesting to me. This is Blavatsky taking questions, which I always find her question and answers absolutely fascinating, because I think when she was writing the books, like 8 entities were writing through her. So it's, the books
cases
are like, they're hardcore. So the question is, can you tell us something of the planets for which the sun and moon were substitutes? She's giving this overview about the development of the planets and the beings that were created as a result. She said, there's no secret in it. And there's a hook here about Vulcan. There's no secret in it, though our modern astrologers are ignorant of these planets. One is an intramercurial planet, intramercurial, that is inside of Mercury, which is supposed to have been discovered and named by anticipation Vulcan. And the other is a planet with a retrograde motion, sometimes visible at a certain hour of night and apparently near the moon. The occult influence of this planet is transmitted to the moon. Question: what is it that made these planets sacred or secret? Blavatsky: their occult influences. Then, do the planetary spirits of the 7 sacred planets belong to another hierarchy than to that of the Earth? And she says, evidently, since the terrestrial spirit of the Earth is not of a very high grade, it must be remembered that the planetary spirit has nothing to do with the spiritual man, but with the things of matter and cosmic beings. Now, it goes on from there in a very interesting fashion. What I'm going to pinpoint is something that she points out, which is a group of beings associated with this planet that is intramercurial, which is supposed to have been discovered by anticipation named Vulcan in 1859. This incredible astronomer discovers what he thinks is a planet inside the strange motion of Vulcan, of Mercury, and he names it Vulcan. Vulcan shows up in the work of Steiner, shows up in the work of Blavatsky. It's there. Mm-hmm. Something is going on there, and there are beings associated with it, but they're not necessarily what we would consider the flesh and blood beings that we're talking about with people who get into, thinking that everything that's a UFO has an alien attached to it. But Gigi, what is it potentially that is going on there with what they're letting out? And I feel like these are drops in that period. They are intel drops of a sort from the mystery schools themselves, but they're telling us there's something here that is not seen by modern astronomy, and there are beings associated with it. And if you go further, and you look at Steiner talking about beings here, that they influence humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some people think that Vulcan is Pluto. Vulcan is not Pluto. Vulcan is a different sphere. And in the anthroposophical system, Vulcan is the final development of the Earth and humanity. And it's associated with a spiritual condition called Atman in the East, or spirit man in the West in anthroposophy. So once humanity and the Earth get to the level that Vulcan is at, or the realm of Vulcan, our physical body will be completely transformed into a spiritual body. The matter that the physicality will be completely transmuted. And so whenever we talk about the planetary spheres, We are also talking about spiritual planes or spiritual realms. That's how the ancients tracked the different heavens or the different spiritual planes, was through planets. And every spiritual plane has a different quality. It's not matter vibrating faster. It's a different quality. And when the soul meets that plane, it must basically create within itself what that plane is, or have developed within itself what that plane represents, to pass into it consciously. So most of the time we're passing through the spheres unconsciously, because the qualities of heaven are not developed within the human being. But Vulcan is, in our development, in our scheme, the most advanced. And of course, Venus and Mercury were switched. So there's a different occultism here. There's a different kind of esoteric science going on with Venus and Mercury, which happened so people can understand the positioning. But Vulcan is the final development of the Earth. So in regard to our planetary development right now, we will move into New Jerusalem at the end of our planetary cycle. People associated this with like the idea of the end of the Earth sort of thing. It's like a revelation kind of, we get into this other thing. So this is
New Jupiter, literally.
Correct. So this is to show that in esoteric science, you track development via planets, via spheres. That's why astrology works so well for anyone who uses it, is because it's actually a language of the soul. So all initiation and all spiritual life is tracked precisely via the planetary spheres and their qualities, because all of those are qualities within your soul. So in a way, they're all different stages of initiation as well. And this is how Rudolf Steiner taught. When you get to the level of New Jupiter, or you get to the level of, the next of humanity, where we're parallel with the angels, then we have a spiritualized mind, which is called spirit self in the West, or manas in the East. Then we move into what is called Venus development, or what is Blavatsky's maybe calling Mercury here, but Steiner calls it Venus, occult Mercury. Then you get to the level of a Buddha. You get what is called life spirit, or Buddhi in the East. After that, you reach the stage of Vulcan, which is Atman in the East, or spirit man in the West, which is when you're basically you've completely mastered matter. And so they're describing different they're describing the heavens, right? But they're also telling you about initiation. They're also telling you about the development of your own soul. They're also telling you about the history of humanity and the future of humanity, all in one statement. So what she's saying there is discussing the evolution of your soul, the evolution of the planet, and the death process, all at once. The death and rebirth process, all of it. It's all through the spheres. That is how initiation has always been tracked. That's how we understand what a saint or a bodhisattva is. This is the language of the soul. It is not something that we fly a spaceship to and hook up to the Borg and have a call it whatever. That is not what that is. If people feel, I think it's a wonderful thought exercise. I think people should question it. I think the process is important. But ultimately, we have to land from a place that is spiritual and understand that the cosmos is the human soul. The cosmos that we see is a literal image of the human soul, of the Earth's past, of the Earth's present, and the Earth's future. And we need to remember how to read it like that and understand it like that to evolve. And anything less will not do. Anything less is a lie. Why? Because it will not evolve you. It will not lead to your eternal life. And that is the only reason why we should even discuss something like another planet. If you want to talk about it in regard to mining a meteor, whatever, that's a scientific discussion. Leave the spiritual stuff out of it, because that's not in the material world. So that's what I would say she's discussing there, is this massive topic. It's everything, really.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. It's very interesting particularly in Theosophy, they talk about life waves,
Hmm.
and those waves that come in to Earth. And here we have CAYCE talking about the incarnation groups coming back together, Atlantis, Lemuria coming in during that World War I, World War II period, and creating this technological havoc all over again. But they're coming in again through waves. And when they discuss beings and things, Gigi, what are the beings? How are we to make of this? Someone could interpret that and say, like, hey, she's talking about a planet, hanging out there that we can't see, that has physical beings, and that's who the aliens are, right? Somebody could interpret it that way. How do we talk about beings here? When they refer to beings, how can we make that something that, what's the clearest idea that you can present?
Yeah, so every world has beings, and every planet is a being. So you have a being within a being within a being. It's everything is you have a microcosm of a world, which is the natural being of that world. And then you have the planet, which is the macro, and the cosmos, which is the macro. That's the organization of man and cosmos. So every planet also is technically a realm, right? So there's always a being of that realm. So man is the being of the natural world, what we would call the material world. We are the embodiment of it. Every animal in existence exists within the human being, and man is the steward of the kingdoms of life beneath us. So we are to take care of the animals, the plants, the minerals, and the elementals. We are to lead them and steward them as the angels steward us. So we are in a stewardship position with the animals, the plants, the minerals, the elementals, the way that the archangels and archai and angels are in a stewardship position to us, the Elohim. So this is actually the real structure of the earth. And it's the structure of the cosmos itself. So every single realm of existence, which is marked by the planets, by a planet, has a being that is the being of that realm, just like we are the being of the natural world, the physical world. When you get into heaven, there's also the beings of those planes. So there's not 542 different beings that exist in the natural world, because the being of the natural world is humanity. There's not 1,000,001 different types of beings in the space between the moon and the earth. There's only angels. There aren't 1,000,000 different kinds of beings in the space between the earth and Mercury or Venus. There's only archangels. When you get to the space between the earth and the sun, those are the archai. There's one kind of being. So this idea that there's all these different kinds of beings with different natures proliferating is a materialist concept, and it's not true. It's never been taught that way. Have even church fathers and different people lost this wisdom and thought about it and talked about it? Sure. But this is the structure of the cosmos as we would classically have understood it, and as we should return to today, because again, it's connected with our soul. And so what I would say to that is that every realm has a being that is the embodiment of that realm. And we experience a bit of a variety because they can interact with us, but every being is according to its own plane.
Oh, it's very fascinating. I'll just say as an aside that there was something trying to thwart your image, and
Really?
yeah, your sound was holding up just fine, but something when you were talking about this was trying to really create this thing. You look fine now, and it's been perfect throughout, and yet when you're talking about this, it started to go into this weird mode.
It's something that I've experienced also. Just a lot of people don't like it. They don't like
yeah.
it. There's a lot of resistance to it. That it could be that interlaced with us. But again, the earth, man is the natural being of the material world. The entire cosmos is a representation of our soul. And then if you look at the orbit of between the moon and the earth, that's the world of the angels. So in that space, that's the angels. That's how we understand it. And then when you go beyond that, then it's the archangels, and then it's the archai. And it's all governed by spiritual beings, by angels in a certain order. The cosmos is actually very orderly. It's not chaotic, actually. There is chaos in certain levels of it, in the underworld, in the darker portions. But I think that there's a great desire for certain forces to want to make us have a chaotic cosmos that we cannot understand. They want to keep it chaotic. An entity can come in at any time from a world that we don't know, that we don't understand. And there's all this discovery that needs to happen based on us never being able to know. And so there's an incredible desire for certain kinds of occultists, certain spiritual forces to want to make the cosmos a very chaotic thing that we can never know or understand, to remove the teachings of the hierarchies, because then you won't have any structure to understand your own soul, the death process, the reincarnation process, spiritual beings. You won't be able to ever classify them properly. So it removes the system of classification of our own soul and spiritual beings by making it chaotic. And then you can have people who are tyrannical come in and give you some warped, materialist, technocratic, transhumanist version of all of this.
Wow.
And they want that. So it is not just about this idea of aliens or whatever. It's actually about creating a chaotic cosmology so that you can't enter into these topics from a place of right understanding, that everything is a microcosm of the macrocosm, that everything is embedded like a Russian doll, that we can understand this, that this is initiation science. That is something that these people cannot have if they want to sell you eternal life in a machine and, you know, weird looking aliens. That's what people will get. Yeah.
Wow. Absolutely fascinating. I think that section is powerful, though, because it's like there's this illusion to beings, you know, and CAYCE even talked about a moon colony of beings.
Yes.
And then he says, before matter.
Correct. Yeah.
So they're beings. So just like the planetary spheres that don't fully manifest to the physical eye, here we go again. And, you know, the eighth sphere, Steiner famously said, cannot be seen with a telescope. It has to be apprehended with clairvoyant eye. But you can see it's linked directly to the earth when you see it.
Exactly.
So we've got classifications of beings. They are there. Perhaps they can even materialize at times, but their structure is not physical.
The matter, yeah, they can materialize, but even if they materialize, they would have to do it through a human being.
Right.
So through ectoplasm, through some kind of manifestation would have to be created through a person. And that's one of the original traditions of like the Delphic oracles, things like this, is bringing things through, which can happen, but they don't come through in the sense like objectively. There's laws about that, because if a being could just appear at any time, the earth would just be destroyed a long time ago. So there's not like, you know, my understanding is that they can't just appear according to their own will on like a whim. There has to be like the right circumstances for that. Sort of like there's a way about it.
There are confusing passages that are fascinating and probably left there as, you know, breadcrumbs for us to follow. One of them, it's very interesting when CAYCE is talking about how people view the Akashic record. And he said, well, you know, don't be too bothered if one person who's looking at that Akashic record comes up with one date and somebody comes up with another, because they were questioning him and saying, well, you know, somebody else said this event took place in 15,000 BC. You have it at 12,000 BC. And he said they're going to interpret it through the lens of their knowledge and understanding, basically. So you're looking at the record, as it were. So I was looking at Steiner's comments on Swedenborg. Of course, Swedenborg is absolutely fascinating and advanced for his period of time. one of the things that Swedenborg does is he takes his consciousness and floats out there and he sees other beings on other planets. And it's very interesting because Steiner says, when he goes out into the cosmos with these visions, he was a very learned man, a scientific man in his regular physical life. And what he's bringing through are the impressions out there, but he's interpreting it through his naturalist scientific mind of that period, maybe 16th century. And so he's bringing through things that maybe have us looking through a glass darkly in a sense, which is he's attributing aspects to other beings and other planets being just like you and I, dressed up in regular outfits and, their houses. He's describing their houses. And I've seen this with Ledbetter, and it's very interesting because Ledbetter has all kinds of visions when he goes out into the cosmos, and he's one of the most gifted in a sense for descriptions. But here he is, and also letting himself in for, kind of later criticism when people say, wait a minute, he's going out into the cosmos and seeing human beings who are dressed like we are. So this is interesting to me, though, because what it says to me is that the way that we look at and interpret these things has a lot to do with our level of being able to appreciate it. That is, if we don't go up higher and bring it into a place where, it's no longer just being filtered through the consciousness of the period, we're not going to get the real picture.
Oh, yeah. That's how there's actually for any medium, any psychic, there's actually a probation period in your own development where you have to learn your symbolic language. So every psychic has like a lexicon in which spirit communicates. And part of it is like an objective, sort of like Jungian thing, but there's also a private personal interpretation and language. And it can take years for a mystic to learn their own internal language, because when you experience the spiritual world, it is an internal experience. So the spirit will use your memories, your vision, your thoughts to convey to you something that is beyond the earth. And so it takes a long time to understand that your mind is going to place its own lexicon on top of that just to be able to communicate, because spiritual beings in the spiritual world is not earthly. So the best thing to do is to not focus on that. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how the beings on these different worlds exist to us. It's a curiosity. I would call that secondary information. What matters for us is not how other beings do basic things or whatever. That's the kind of information that comes after you already understand the basic tenets of the cosmos and initiation and the soul. So when you go into things backwards like that, you get a weird picture, and then it just gets stranger and stranger and stranger. When we're at a point, I would argue, where we have to educate ourselves and understand just the foundations right now. Because if we've got an entire culture that thinks that Ashtar Command is in a spaceship, or that these beings are in spaceships and they're going to give us technology, or that this is going on, that indicates that we have to understand the spiritual reality of the spheres. And once we understand the spiritual reality of the spheres and the relationship to the soul, then we can understand how beings like that are like us and how they are different. So we have to understand the foundation first. Otherwise, when we go into these topics, we're just going to project all this earthly stuff, and it can become delusional really fast. There's always a kernel of truth, because there are beings within these different planes. That's subjectively true. They live a life like we're living here. That's true. They have their own thing going on, but it's a different nature than us. And so we can't bring their nature to our own. And so, I would say that we start with a foundation, And then we can get into the more nuances, but we can't enter into it without that foundation.
Oh, that is really, yeah. It is, it's the interpretation becomes valuable at that level, because what's happening actually is the person is ascertaining information at different levels. It's like when they look at the Akashic record. It's very interesting. I remember there's a quote where they asked Casey, well, there's this whole cosmic memory thing with Rudolf Steiner, and he's talking all about Atlantis, and is his book, real? Like, should we put any stake in it? And he said, oh, it's absolutely correct on a trend. He said it is an individual grasping and looking at that Akashic record and filtering it down for presentation based on what he's viewing. So he's saying, yeah, it's correct. And he's saying the trend is the person's individual mind.
Oh, 100%. And even with Steiner, if you notice, like, how he tends to talk about Atlantis or Lemuria or even the spiritual hierarchies, he has these introductory lectures where he will describe the architecture of the soul first and the architecture of the spiritual hierarchies, or he'll describe, like in Cosmic Memory, he doesn't just go along and describe Atlanteans using plant seeds as the power of their ships.
Yeah.
He doesn't just go into the menial everyday life things. He does whole preambles discussing how consciousness evolved to the point of Atlantis, the kind of bodies that they had. So he'll cover the foundational knowledge first, and then he'll work it down to some material elements to communicate the spiritual realities that he's laid out. So that's the way you do it, is you have to completely describe the type of consciousness, the position that humanity was in our development, the environment of the earth, the condition of the elements. So you really have to create the environment first, that architecture. And then once that's there and it's clear, then you can start to work in these little menial things, like how they worshipped or the kind of buildings they had or whatever. But you have to first understand exactly the condition of the earth and man and the trajectory of that. That's the only way to do it, because otherwise you immediately apply our condition and our mind and our things on it, when in reality, if it's another planet, even if it's another epoch, it's actually a different condition. So this is what this is. And so Steiner was famous for for teaching that way, and I think that that's the cleanest way to teach.
Very interesting. They agree, Casey and Steiner, on so many different
Casey.
levels. It's interesting too, because they both agree on the reincarnations of different individuals, like John the Baptist as Raphael and Elijah on the early side, incarnating as John the Baptist, and then later incarnating as Raphael, bringing a different set of gifts to humanity. I always find that interesting, because trying to find and piece together where these mystics agree is valuable in that sense. One thing I wanted to put across, which again is something that could be interpreted a number of different ways, and I wanted to get your input on it. And I can actually even read the quote, but I'm going to give it to you first, which is Steiner talking about how the Vulcan men are already here and have been in the earth since the 19th century, but humanity acknowledges them not. Thus, since the 80s of the 19th century, heavenly beings are seeking to enter this earth existence. Just as the Vulcan men were the last to come down to earth, so Vulcan beings are now actually entering the earth existence. Heavenly beings are already here on earth existence. And it is thanks to the fact that beings from beyond the earth are bringing messages down into this earthly existence that it is possible at all to have a comprehensive spiritual science today. Taken as a whole, however, how does the human race behave? If I may say so, the human race behaves in a cosmically rude way toward the beings who are appearing from the cosmos on earth, albeit to begin with, only slowly. Humanity takes no notice of them, ignores them. It is this that will lead the earth into increasingly tragic conditions. For in the course of the next few centuries, more and more spirit beings will move among us, whose language we ought to understand. We shall understand it only if we seek to comprehend what comes from them, namely the contents of spiritual science. This is what they wish to bestow on us. They want us to act according to spiritual science. They want this spiritual science to be translated into social action in the conduct of everyday life. Since the last third of the 19th century, we're actually dealing with the influx of spirit beings from the universe. Initially, these were beings dwelling in the sphere between the moon and Mercury. Who are those beings?
Yeah, that's really incredible. I think that he means definitely spiritual beings. I don't feel like he's referring to, aliens coming from a planet in a spaceship and, living here at all.
Are you sure? No,
I think. And so I think that this
No,
is
I agree. I agree with you. The context is very tight, spiritual, but it is interesting. Vulcan men are here and we're rude apparently to them. How does that work? Is it that, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that, I feel like humanity, when Steiner has a cosmology where at the incarnation of Christ, you get the turning point in time. So at that point, the Earth development swings into an entirely different kind of existence than before the incarnation of Christ. So this is a huge thing that we have to understand, actually. Then we start to move towards these Vulcan existence, which is basically a Christ-like existence for every single person. It's a level of mastership, right? And so they therefore begin to descend into our world and provide these forces for us to be like them. But if we're so trapped in these early conditions, which Rudolf Steiner called atavistic conditions, Rudolf Steiner said that humanity's natural sensibilities and compulsions is actually rooted in something called atavism, or these old spiritual perceptions, this old way of being that is too collectivist, like a hive mind, interprets spiritual things materially, unconscious living. And so a huge portion of humanity, unfortunately, is not conscious, is not aware, does not understand. They're not self-conscious. We are not self-conscious fully as human beings. And so then when you experience an angel from Vulcan, a spiritual being from Vulcan, that is the most advanced level that we can comprehend. There are higher degrees, but that is the hierarchy that we can comprehend. That is, after that, it becomes almost difficult to conceptualize. You get to the level of Elohim and things like that, or the powers. And so I think that what he's talking about is we're getting this influx of these very advanced souls, or these very advanced beings from the Vulcan plane or the Vulcan sphere, however you want to look at it, which represents the transcendence of matter itself. They're the most advanced that we can understand, and they're beginning to impart for their own development their secrets and their wisdom upon us. Because for them to evolve, they have to deposit something within us as kind of a sacrifice for themselves. And so if we're stuck in the old way of being, in the atavistic consciousness, I have a few lectures on atavism if people want to know the details about that on YouTube. But if we're stuck in this atavistic consciousness that's unaware, that's, working in a hive mind, not individuated, not conscious, then we will not see the beings from Vulcan properly, because they represent what we will become if we are to pass every test, right? So
oh yes,
that's how I see that. We're kind of where we are is in the Steiner system. We're sort of at the level of consciousness soul, where we're at a point where we're just becoming conscious from thousands and thousands of years of being unconscious. You know, most of our existence on this planet has been tribal and completely unconscious, and now we're conscious. And so we have to learn how to live that way and be individuals and unite our will as an individual with God's will, which is the mystery of Vulcan, really, is to be completely united in your will with God's will. And
Well, I
so,
can see, yeah. Oh, that is incredible. And it's such an interesting point of understanding and development, because we need to get to understanding what Vulcan is. Right now, it's thought of as, some kind of a throwback idea from the 18th century about a planet that doesn't exist or something. And of course, Star Trek had Vulcans.
yeah, I was just thinking people probably think like Leonard Nimoy.
But it is interesting. I can see us really opening this subject up in an entirely different presentation. I want to do that, and I'll tell you why. One of the weird things that I've kept track of with Vulcan is Steiner saying when those beings incarnate, they're often very mystical, high mystics, but because of the type of vibration that they have, very often their legs won't work.
Oh, really?
And so he says there's a series of ancient depictions through Egypt and Rome and Greece and everything else where you have these, incredible beings described, and they are often shown with either shriveled legs or in a sitting position where they can't. I found that interesting for so many reasons. And I find that projection into the earth plane of beings of this nature have all sorts of different, they're working on one level, but they may actually come in with something physically that does not, would not seem ideal for humanity.
Right. And you could almost view it also as a kind of sacrifice.
Yes.
In order to bring in something, in order to bring in something so great, there's the sacrifice that you have to make because it's so beyond the physical, it's so beyond the average physical existence that you have to sacrifice something in order to bring that through. See, really high mysticism, really high service mysticism is all about what you will give up. It's not about power at all. It's about what can you give up? What can you not have? It's about completely actually fasting and separating from materiality in truth. So I can see there having to be this incredible sacrifice often to bring something very powerful through. And also just to bring it into the body, like just to bring it in, it can also harm the body too. Not because it's like a negative entity or something, but it's hard on the body. When you're bringing in something super, super high, that's leagues above where the earth is, it can be hard on the body. For a long time, even with whatever I was doing, it would wear my body down until I learned. You learn how to, I mean, I have legs, let's be clear. I know no one is, but like, thank God, knock
She's
wood.
got legs.
But I can see it also taking a toll on the body over time, or there being certain sacrifices in order to bring something that advanced, because you're working with if you're working with something that is so exalted that it's gonna take something to do that.
Oh, that is incredible. And of course, we never think about this aspect of it, which is when you're cooking with that Kundalini fire, caution. It is incredibly,
and
it's
I think
explosive. The rewards are great, but it's explosive.
It's and people will honestly tell you, like, do not try to just randomly open your Kundalini and develop gifts. You want to develop any perception you have through just your self-healing and just your self-realization. You'll get capacities through you healing your trauma, basically. It'll happen naturally. Don't try to like focus on it obsessively, because then you can do these things. But I can also imagine a soul that exalted would probably readily do anything that was like that in order to be of service. Like, I don't think they really care about.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I don't think that they're thinking about how their legs look today. You know,
I'll
they're
tell
just
you
like,
what's
I'm on a
weird.
mission. I'm on a mission.
Yes.
This is the mission. Legs be darned. I'm here. That's how I think it is.
I'm going to tell you something very strange, which is the Kenneth Arnold story, the original breakout UFO story that got everything rolling. Over and over again in his initial account, he says, you know, it was weird when I encountered the guy at the hotel who said there was a room set up for me. He was handicapped. When I got off the plane to give, you know, the guy who connected me with the press, he was handicapped. He said over and over again, when I was encountering these different people involved with the early aspect of my sighting, and when I went to investigate, I encountered handicapped people on a regular basis. And you know how my mind works. I heard that and I instantly crisscrossed it with the weird Vulcan thing in Steiner's work. And I was like, isn't this interesting that it's a factor at all in the Arnold book and that he mentions it?
Yeah, and it's almost like the legs are also what attaches you to the ground,
Yes.
to the earth.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's like, if you're bringing in something from the highest sphere we can understand, it's almost like it would disconnect you from the earth in part.
Yes.
So the organs, that the part of your body that is about grounding and rooting and connecting with the earth, maybe that would be not something that you could have or maintain, because so much of your life is up here that you're like almost just functioning in a different way, where you're not even grounded on the earth, metaphorically. But that's interesting. I do think that if we can actually understand spiritual beings in this way, like from an initiation sense, and associate that with the spheres, I think so much of this stuff would open up. And I think that people will find that the mysteries are so much more interesting as well. That seeing it this way, like just even that little factoid about the beings from Vulcan having that effect on the body so the legs don't move, is that not completely fascinating?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then we can attach it to our own level of initiation and be like, well, what is that like for humanity? What is the Vulcan development like? There's a way into this where we can see this incredibly strange thing, like this being from another world, but then we get to talk about the development of our own soul along with it. That's the way. And it's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not boring, it's completely interesting, right? That how these beings affect the body, what they represent. It doesn't take anything away from the even entertaining aspect of Gaia or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, it's full of little fascinating tidbits like that.
Don't you know, Gigi, the UFO story is we have to fight that government for free energy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing that could be down the pipe. We got to watch that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's interesting about fire, and that's another theme that we'll pick up in that follow-up episode we're going to do on this. But I think it's interesting. There's a series of CAYCE stories where he quits the psychic work because one thing or another has happened, or he's been shunned by his church, or his wife's family is like, you know, what are you doing sleeping and giving these devil trances, you? And to help people, you know, physically. And so he goes through these trials over and over again. So he's like, you know what? I'm out of here. I've had it. And I'm going into photography. And he goes and he sets up his photography studio, invests all this money and everything else. And it gets consumed by fire. So he's like, what's going on here? He gives some readings again. And it turns out that his father and this doctor are conspiring during the readings. And they're making him, give this information for horse races and things like that. And he's walking around with these terrible migraines. And this incredible, one day, you know, when he's going through this incredible Eastern master shows up out of nowhere and says, "You're with the wrong people." And Casey's like, what is going on here? And nobody else sees, you know, when he goes out there, he's like, who was that guy? And nobody saw the guy come in. So Casey figures it out. Then he goes back to photography, and guess what? his studio blows up again.
Well,
So there's a weird thing with the psychic energy also, which is that, and also he had a few incidents where when he became angry, that in one case the sofa that he was on turned into fire. So
whoa.
yeah, so the psychic, the kickoff of that psychic energy. There's a famous story where he tries to get out of psychic work again, and he goes to work for a hospital, and he is running the X-ray plates, and they're coming out with like 3 or 4 different spines and all this different weird imagery, and they're like, "You're out of here in
Oh
less
my
than a week."
gosh.
So there's a strange thing when somebody has that, and I know that you have it, and you've experienced a lot of very interesting physical aspects, and that's why when that Vulcan thing came up, I was like, "Whoa," you know.
Yeah, and I've never lit a couch on fire, and I hope I hope I never do. But the different psychics have different ways in which the energy works in their particular body due to past lives, due to their organization. So yeah, no, I've had like wild, like weird, wild, and I've had crazy poltergeist activity. And I think that you sort of have a contract in your life to serve. And I think that your angels and guides are trying to, they try to keep you on that direction, on that path, not just like, I mean, for you, really, ultimately. But it is a difficult path. And so I understand Casey walking away from it for sure.
Yeah,
For sure. There's so many times where I was like, "Oh, I don't think I can do this."
yeah, I
I
can
don't
imagine.
I don't know if I can. This is just it's too weird. Or once you start doing work, negative forces start appearing too when you just want to like do something. They're like, some of these negative things are around. Um,
Wow.
there's
Yeah,
all kinds of stuff that goes on, and you kind of just gotta trooper on. Yeah.
it's incredible. It's an incredible life that you lead having this. It's like you get this incredible special talent, but then it's that whole thing about like, oh, am I seeing too much here? And we're so glad that you have not walked away from it, because the things that you're bringing through are exactly what we need to hear. And but it is remarkable. So even that aspect of it, you've lived it. So it's a wonderful thing for me to biographize the Casey life, but to be in it, I think is something special.
Oh, it's a wonderful gift. I couldn't imagine doing anything else, and it's my total joy. So it's my joy.
Well, we're so glad to have your work in this crucial time. Now, let's switch gears here and point out the commercialization of the UFO file. Some whistleblowers holding out for big deals and IP deals and all the rest. And, of course, on crucial issues like the UFO file and the secret space program.
Which is actually a very important conversation. You've talked about Gary McKinnon and all this stuff that goes on that actually we need to talk about. Then suddenly these, grifters come in, and they're saying that this incredible topic is their intellectual property. I mean, I guess so, because you said it on a TV show or you've been on an interview or what, like, I guess so. But it's just sort of like, it is so lowbrow. It is so not the attitude of somebody who actually cares about the topic. It takes sacrifice to make these things go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think of everybody who has died for this topic, okay? Like everyone who's ever been taken by X-Protect.
Yes.
Think about JFK. Think about
Right.
people that we don't know, and this is your intellectual property now.
Right.
Go home. Take a nap.
Yeah,
Touch
yeah.
grass. No,
Yeah.
not today. That's how I feel. So.
Oh boy, is that right on? It's extraordinary. And it is extraordinary to me because these people are in the heart of the Trump disclosure administration piece, and it's people around the Trump administration. And the thing is, I want to say this, that many of the people involved despise Trump. Mellon used to write reams and reams of hatred against Trump. So to have him as the point man, with Luna, and he's the one who's delivering the videos for the tranche of releases. I mean, this is the worst type of person you'd want involved with that. it's very clear. I put it on the record that Warner said, he knew that Grush had been recruited at Mellon Bilderberg up there in Pittsburgh, and he'd been recruited to come out and work with Mellon, and Mellon guided him into this process. Those people never denied that. They never denied it once. They don't want to take that one on because, well, if in fact Chris Mellon had control over Grush and now they're rolling him out as the whistleblower, and Lou and Mellon have been doing that in the background. So, it's not to heap it on Grush, and I think he is somebody caught up in the middle of these DoD billionaires trying to create a false UFO threat. But Gigi, the danger of these people and their own delusionary nature of thinking, one of the things that Grush said to me over and over again was, well, it's, I guess I'm the one who's going to do this, and I'm the one that they're putting out there for disclosure, and I can really accomplish it. I didn't think that this was going to be possible, and it's me, And this is the type of coaching in the NLP that they do in the background to these people who have a genuine curiosity but can be used as patsies.
I think David Grush, I think if you're watching this, I think you need to think about the things that you've been fed. And I think you have time to come forward and actually do something good and actually change the movement in the way that you're imagining yourself doing it. The way that you're doing it right now is not going to bring the change that you're envisioning. I think it's a noble desire to want to liberate people in this talk. I think it's a noble desire, but the way that it's going about with its connection to Mellon, with IP, it's not a noble pursuit. And you still have time to make it one.
Oh, right.
You still have time to make it one. You can come out and you can do this right. It's not too late. But if you go down the path that's been set for you by these billionaires, it will be a humiliation. For sure, because that's how it's gone with every other person. And that's how it typically goes. So
wow. Gigi, that is incredible. And it's so on the money. It's amazing. It is amazing to me. This is the environment that we're in. These are the people that we're talking about. And it's funny because, one of the things that we've pointed out over the years is like, isn't it interesting that the same people who think, oh, I can stand up against the forces of the world and get this disclosure out would be afraid of this DoD billionaire in the background and saying like, oh, I can't do it. I'll make him mad, So how can you even imagine that yourself, as an individual would have the kind of courage to break the paradigm and bring all this stuff forward if you're cowering at the thought of what this guy would think of you?
It's a conflict within the personality. Yeah. But I think the audience feels it. And I think like, if you need any evidence for the fact that this is not going to go well, nobody showed up at your speech. If people were, think about it. And this is not coming from a place of cruelty or arrogance. This is a serious topic that we need to have justice around. If people really were supporting you and believed you and were going to idolize you, they would have shown up at your event.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, they would have got right. So this is internet fodder. This is something that people are talking about as like an entertainment thing. Or, in some other context than you being some great individual. I mean, a lot of people are making fun of this as well.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we've had enough of billionaires, tech billionaires, using patsies, using bobos to try to manipulate some of the most important topics that face us. And I think the real heroic thing is to just do the right thing and turn away from that whole structure. That is heroic. That's the move, not to go along with whatever these bizarre self-interested billionaires want, but to actually turn against it. That's where real heroism is.
Oh, no question about it. It's fascinating and really true. I think it's so interesting how you can get caught up in your own, rhetoric and your own promo PR. And it's the same guy who's repping all their books. He got Lou Elizondo the book deal. He's getting Grush the book deal. He did the Age of Disclosure movie. It's Dan Farah, who was the producer for Steven Spielberg and worked with Clapper to put out Age of Disclosure documentary. I mean, that's what we're getting. We're getting people on the inside connected to intelligence agencies with one foot, and the left foot is in Hollywood. And that's the crisscross. And that's, they threw these whistleblowers and UFO types into the podcast sphere. They threw them in there like spaghetti against the wall. And it just, they decided, we have to leapfrog over this and go to Hollywood because this thing isn't working the way we wanted it to.
And it's kind of like, I feel like the Hollywood thing is almost like a last resort as well.
Yeah.
It's and it didn't. I mean, Spielberg's movie didn't. I don't feel like it went as well as it could have.
The response. Yeah, I mean, Spielberg is going to get a certain amount of heft, no matter what he does. He's going to get a certain amount of acclaim, but it seems that the movie did not land the way that they wanted it to, and a lot of people were saying, well, it comes across as dated. First of all, so many of the things that happen on television, and did the script come from 1997? So there is that strange thing. One thing I wanted to mention to you, because it fits right in with what you've been saying, which is Spielberg came out and he said, this movie, the thrust of it is going to shake up Christianity. He wasn't referring to other religions, Buddhism, Muslim, anything. He said it's going to shake up Christianity. Gigi, do you find the comment odd in the context of the whole thing?
Yeah, it's been he was trying to say that like the fact that disclosure came out during the government disclosure was missed, like it was a coincidence.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
But then he
comes
out and
yeah.
Like, okay. And then, but he comes out.
Sure. Who's going to believe that?
I mean, the timing, right? We're supposed to believe that. I mean, it's an insult again to the intelligence of humanity. And he comes out and he's like, well, my movie is profound. It's so profound that every person that watches it is going to be like, oh, did Jesus exist? Is like, I mean, they'll no longer be Christian. That is such an arrogant and bizarre state. I mean, I can't even think of creating something, a book or a movie, and then being like, you will question your religion after. Like, it's a completely inflated thing to say, first of all. But that was the messaging of disclosure as well, which he claims to not be part of, which was during all of these tranches that are dropped, you had people coming out saying like, you better prepare your pastors, give them a call, a call, because the alien narrative is coming out and your religion is going to crumble. And so it was a bizarre, and then you've got Peter Thiel gathering all this data from his Christian think tanks from months on end before that. And it's like they are targeting Christianity in particular, obviously, because Christianity is what formed the West.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a unique impulse with Christianity, which is the individual and freedom. That doesn't exist in any other system to the degree that it exists in the West and in Christianity. That's part of the Western mysteries and culture. And so you have to kind of get that. You have to destroy that. Even if it's the impulse of Christ. It's the impulse of Christianity, not necessarily dogmatic religion. You can make so many arguments about the harms that dogmatic religion has caused. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the impulse and nature of Christ in the world and its effect on every human being as being an individual, which is a Steinerian esoteric Christian concept that comes out very strongly in Anthroposophy. Steiner writes The Philosophy of Freedom, and that the Christ is deeply connected to the impulse of freedom for every human being. The West is founded on this idea of Christianity and the objective spiritual principles that are behind the Christ, one of which is liberation and freedom. And so you have to destroy that if you want to create a technate. Like, you can't create a technate when people are praying and believing in their individuality and operating that way. So you have to strategically destroy that. And I think that that's really what they're doing, is destroying Christ and every they're trying to destroy Christ in the world. They're telling on themselves by being like, yeah, you're not going to have that once we reveal to you these secrets. It's like, why are you even why are you even saying that? Like, they're telling on themselves, really.
Oh, it's so weird. And I think the part of the problem is that the false independent media that they've created with corporate money, let's face it, and I've looked at the stats, and Gigi, you and I have talked about it, but we're talking about billions and billions of dollars behind this new industry of co-opting these very subjects that we've been talking about. What they're doing with that, I find very interesting, because what they're trying to be able to make with that whole podcast push around this is a new paradigm for how information is, gets sent and disseminated. And one of the things that happens in relation to this is that people absorb topics from hosts who don't know anything about the topic. And what do they do when they go to find out about the UFO subject? They'll bring in CIA experts, give us the answers on the CIA thing about UFOs. And they're like, oh, intelligence expert says this is what UFOs are doing. And there are 80 colonies on the moon and all this stuff. And so you can get sent in any obfuscated direction that will take you so far off the path. And that jobs program is off the charts, because the bottom line of counterintelligence is disinformation. Those people will be sitting there and you'll have wasted 10, 20 years of your life not knowing you didn't get any kind of truth from those people. You would have been so misdirected. In fact, it would have been better had you not engaged with the topic at all. That's why the potent thing is so important with this. How do you, Gigi, in that field, like you're bringing forward so many different types of revelations in the work that you do, and you're in a sea of this weird hyper-manipulated space. And how do you cope with it yourself? Like, how do you see it? And how do you see that situation kind of ever getting better?
It is very frustrating. And I think part of the undercurrent on a spiritual level is that we're now in an age where we have to understand intellectually and objectively the spiritual world and spiritual beings. So us discussing it, talking about it, forming objective conceptions of the spiritual world to know it just as deeply as the natural world, that's a good thing. So the discussion is good. I think there can be nothing more nourishing than a podcast that has, like, as you're saying, this really deep conversation that leads you into an intellectual experience. So you're understanding what our ancestors in early periods would only understand through myth, through story. We used to only interact with spiritual concepts through story, such as why entertainment is such a big thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the talking is really important. The discussion is right. We should be discussing it. There should be that level of intellectual understanding, because it's different now for us. But what ends up happening is that you see these podcasts emerge where suddenly people are experts on the topic and they get like 500,000, 1 million followers overnight.
Right.
They use AI to aggregate other people's information.
Oh,
and then
yes.
they teach it improperly.
Right.
So now you've got your information, your material being stolen, but because they weren't the ones who brought that through, who thought of it, who did the actual labor and work around it, they can't do anything else with it. They can't explain it to anyone.
Right.
They can't take questions about it. They can't elaborate on it. And when they do, it just turns into this bizarre caricature kind of thing because they didn't do the work. And so it's like a disservice to their audience because they don't actually have the capacity to speak about the topic to begin with. They end up leading people, as you said, into like a million different directions, to the point that they're like at a negative level of spirituality now because they don't have a cosmology or a concept, which is needed for our time, to actually enter into these topics properly. So,
oh, wow. Is that really true? Yeah.
Yeah. And so they steal from people, like various people have done this to you on your original, but because they stole it, they have no ability to take it any further. And it's just pure, wanting clicks or wanting to divert people into something else. And it's some, viewers need to understand that part of the podcast world is that such a huge portion of it is plagiarized. And
no question.
Especially with AI. And yeah, especially some of the podcasts that appear overnight and suddenly get this huge audience. That's a red flag as well,
Oh, no question. It's all sizzle and no steak. And we know how they can ramp up the algorithm to just run into this direction. If they're dealing with that type of money, if DoD billionaires are involved, we've seen it. And the important thing for them, Gigi, is they need to control that narrative. Why, Gigi? Why do they need to control that narrative?
Because I think ultimately, that they have a plan for humanity. I think ultimately the truth is their greatest enemy. And I think that they don't want people to be coming in contact with the real history or real truth. And they want to keep everybody obscured and try to focus all attention onto themselves. But I also believe that these people have a very specific kind of occultism and spiritual practice that feeds on people. And I think that their kind of occultism is a kind of black magic where they get energy by getting your attention and then leading you nowhere, wasting your life, spinning you in all these different directions and never doing anything. It's a form of energy vampirism. It allows them to continue what they're doing. It keeps you weak because you're never understanding the objective reality of the spiritual world or spiritual beings or the history of advanced technology. You're always in some fantasy, which extends their power. And it also is a form of energy vampirism. It also keeps down any individuals that are willing to challenge them by discouraging them, but they also have, it's interesting to me too, because I do think that they have themselves certain weird spiritual ideologies. I do think that at the very top, they're vicious and aggressive transhumanists.
Yeah.
Deep in delusion. I think that they do have a materialist view of the cosmos. I think that a lot of people do think that like aliens created humanity rather than a genuine divine creation. I think that they believe these things. I think that on a higher level that a lot of people do believe these things. And I think that on some level, that's why they think that they're so profound, is because they believe it. Some are probably atheist or whatever, but I do think that there's also like a weird thing where they have like a anti-Christic transhumanist belief system. And I think that in a way they're like revealing it, to the public to see if they can get away with it too.
Oh, absolutely.
So lots of different things going on.
Yes, no question. They are creating an entire paradigm, and they think that it's going to shoot them past the normal kind of tree of life, as it were, which they've studied, I'm sure, very deeply. And they're going to shoot right past the traditional, I'm going to spiritually evolve thing and just ricochet into this high tech, I'm going to place my consciousness inside of a robot and I'll be all set. Of course, Musk famously says within, a few decades, every human being will have 2 robots serving them. Yeah. Well,
and like his thing too, where he's like, nobody will have any money problems and we'll all be, it's like, well, you first, if you like, if this is what, why don't you just give all your money away?
It's like money won't be important. Everyone will have universal high income. Yeah, sure. Bring it on.
Because that's worked in history so well. Okay.
Gigi, I wanted to say there too, I should mention when we talk about people and their work being suppressed and ripped off, I've seen that with your work for years, literally. But I've seen in particular that certain aspects of your work become suppressed or hit into this whole censorship vibe. And it is when you hit after leaders like Thiel, like Gates, and come in from that angle, and the people that are pushing the false UFO paradigm, that seems to be where they really do the stopgap on your work. I've noticed, where they'll let certain things through and then bang, when you get into these topics, watch out. And they'll do incredible things about rerouting your work or having someone else co-adopt it.
Yeah, because I actually think that esoteric Christianity in particular is very frightening to them. Because I think that, which is what I'm most interested in, and I work from that paradigm. I think that the esoteric Christianity is very terrifying, because in esoteric Christianity, you get all of those really deep mysteries around resurrection that are only hinted at. And in dogmatic Christianity, obviously there is a central point on eternal life. But the transhumanists want to tell you that eternal life comes through a machine. And they're fighting amongst themselves as to who gets to be the guy that brings that forward. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, Elon Musk said, he said that with his Neuralink, you'll have powers like Jesus or greater than Jesus.
Right.
So what does that make you then? What does that in this diluted statement, like, what does that make you? It makes you greater than Jesus. So if you're bringing forward the technology that is going to be greater than Jesus or like Jesus, and you're bringing that forward, you're in a backhanded way saying you are him or greater, right?
Oh, wow.
And so they keep doing this. They keep sniping at Christianity, because Christianity is the particular esotericism that describes eternal life and initiation science around the individual. In the Eastern systems, it does exist. There is the concept of the diamond body, the immortal body. I have 2 lectures on this on my channel for anyone that wants to see the Eastern perception of the immortal body. It exists there. It's called Atman in the Eastern traditions. It's not that the East doesn't have it. It speaks about it in a different way than in the West. And it's that Western discussion around eternal life and immortality and the transformation of the physical body to a spiritual body, the glorification of the astral body and the etheric body. That is what they cannot have. They can handle dogmatic religion that cannot scientifically explain resurrection. They can handle that. They can handle Jesus being a story and resurrection being something that no one can understand but just expects at the end of the earthly development. They can handle that, because they know that a lot of people are looking now for this intellectual description of resurrection. Like the discussion is important. We have to scientifically know the deeds of Christ. We have to understand it on a scientific, spiritually scientific level, what spiritual initiation is, what a spiritual master or a saint or a Dhyani Kohan or a Buddha or a Bodhisattva is. We have to know what this is. And that is present in a big way in esoteric Christianity. It's in the East as well, but the way that it's done in esoteric Christianity is it's directly prescriptive in a way that wasn't possible before the incarnation. They're not competing, they're compatible, but that is what the elites fear the most, is they don't want people having that objective scientific knowledge of eternal life, because how to glorify yourself, because they want to sell you eternal life through a machine that they create so that you enter into their weird cloud. So they can't have any eternal life teachings if they're trying to get you to think that you live forever in a machine, or that you modify your genes to live forever, which is also fake. So they have this whole thing. They want to sell you eternal life. They can't have Christianity exist. And they know that the East doesn't get into it from the same direction that we get in the West. So they're not as threatened by the Eastern mysteries because of the way that it's entered into in the West. So That's what I think. It's about eternal life ultimately, which is Ahriman, right? It's exactly what Steiner said with Ahriman and all of that. So
Oh, there's no question about it. It's fascinating the way you put that too, because what I see when I look out, just like when they try to deny that UFOs existed in the first place, and then they co-opted the subject in 2017. Leslie Kane put the article out praising Lou and put the whole phony story of him as a whistleblower and all that. Then, if you think about what they're doing with co-opting Christianity, well, they were trying to push the transhumanist atheist part, and it didn't seem to be going over so well. They're like, this part, there's too many people who believe too deeply on these different subjects. We have to go in, Thiel has to go in and co-opt the religious groups. And he's using all sorts of experts, including experts from the UFO field, by the way. And it's actually, there's a scandalous piece to it. Now, here's an interesting thing since we're talking about Thiel, which is this is the week that his secret society got revealed. Thiel Bilderberg, called Dialogue, and you get these 300 some odd elite individuals who meet up on these different islands and get together and work out subjects like, how to develop a cult, or how aliens can take over the role in religion, or what type of new types of sex life can we have, in the post modern techno world. Yeah, you don't want to get around Thiel and sex.
I feel bad for the person that was hacking that.
Yeah, don't lose your lunch over that one. But what I would say is, this is very interesting because here we have it right in the heart of it. And who comes forward to defend Thiel immediately? But Eric Weinstein. And he comes forward and he says, what I'm going to do, sure, all this stuff is coming out. He's like, well, I guess now it's time to reveal that there's a fashion week. And he starts making fun of the whole thing. And he's like, you guys have too much time on your hands or whatever. No, yes, you were involved and you were there and you went to these meetings with sketchy Thiel. And he said, oh yeah, and Peter's a friend who I still talk to occasionally. Yeah, well, you ran his family business for 10 years, so you're a very close friend. And part of the whole podcast spawn that we got later was all test run early on with Eric and his podcast producers, all Thiel people who now we have out there, scavenging the different UFO topics and grabbing things from the X series and all that stuff. So we've gone into that, the whole Jesse Michaels nonsense and all the rest of it. And I've put that on the record with him and his plagiarism, not just of me either. But I think it is interesting because that's Thiel. That's Thiel deadbolt center. There's no escaping that.
Pulling back the curtain, and you're seeing this. I would be embarrassed too and be like, a fashion week or whatever if my little secret society got discovered.
You're like, so I had lunch with Lucifer, so what?
Who cares? God, I always
I do his bidding throughout the world. What's the big problem?
So what? We were talking about how to form a cult. What's it to you? Yeah, that's what, Eric, I think the last thing I want to think about is like Peter Thiel forming a cult and having this weird group come together. But Eric's a fascinating character because he does kind of insert himself very authoritatively in the UFO file stuff.
Yes.
I've seen him repeatedly claiming that he has mathematically solved the most incredible equations about different dimensions and things like that. I think he imagines himself as a steward of this topic. I think the way that he talks about it, and I think he imagines himself as a leader in this field. Recently, he was begging for tissue samples.
Oh.
It was like, it's time for the tissue samples.
Oh,
it's like, well, did you just get are you orchestrating some weird portion of disclosure where soon you guys release a body? It was like, bring the tissue samples. I'm not going to take disclosure seriously until you get a body. It's like, well, did you talk about that at your meeting with Peter Thiel, or was that your own thought? Or
well, here's some synchronicity on that. That's very interesting. I'll tell you why. Because when Grush was doing that event, he had Leslie Kane there, the same woman who had launched the false UFO New York Times article in the first place. And of course, very interesting background there, as she was Bud Hopkins' consort for a decade, and they lived together, and she got through all of his research and everything else. Of course, she never talked about him for some strange reason. I mean, that's her personal life, but still, I find it odd that a UFO investigator who was with this guy, who was the top guy in the abduction fields with regressive hypnosis and inspired John Mack, never mentions him. Seems a little strange.
Yeah, the information that she must have from
Absolutely.
inside information from that, yeah.
And I would think, so she comes forward and she says, we need to change the emphasis. Now, here's the trial balloon. We need to change the emphasis in the UFO research field from the technology to the biologics.
Oh.
Now, Gigi, what do you think of the idea that they've got to a point of redeveloping, human cloning and all the rest of it, that they think they can produce something that will pass as an alien, dead alien, and present him to the public, and they don't have to show any of the technology or any of the crash craft, nothing like that. No apotheum, anything. Here he is, Mr. Dead Alien Corpse.
Well, that would be a wonderful distraction. And of course, who gets to test the genetics of this thing? Right. Does the person from the university in Alabama get to test the alien? Does the person in the University of Alaska that's not connected, do they get to test the body? Or is it their scientists that always get to do this genetic testing and come forward with whatever it is? So it's just like this very controlled movement. And yeah, if they brought forward, what is it, like Skinny Bob or something, like these gray
J-Rod,
and then wasn't like Donald Trump was like tweeting images of himself walking with like an alien.
Oh,
and
he's
like, just kidding, it's legal aliens. Like, there's so much weird stuff going on with it. He's been tweeting like himself with these aliens, and Uri Geller was tweeting about how, the president.
Gigi, the alien was in chains. What? Chained up alien?
Yeah.
I mean, this is strange. And these are the large grays too. He was walking with a big one.
He was like jacked.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even want to open the app anymore.
Exactly. I don't blame you. It is a kind of pollution. There's no question about it.
It's trivializing it, but again, it's like showing him with this biological entity. It's showing him with an alien. It's not showing Trump in front of like a UFO that he's discovered. It's not showing the technology. It's showing like this.
Bingo.
It's about the body.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, well, so.
Well, I can track back to what TTSA was doing, and they specifically were like, don't talk about bodies. And they were, there's a threat from a craft. Craft can do everything that we can't do. Oh my God, it's over our nuclear sites, which is true. UFOs over nuclear sites is a huge issue. There they are, though, extrapolating that whole thing. And in fact, if we track this back a lot, and I would talk for hours about this, but JFK himself got into trouble over this and got assassinated ultimately for wanting to share with the Russians the fact that, well, if these UFOs, he said to his CIA director and NASA director, if they go over a nuclear site in Russia, they're going to think it's us. This is a problem. Let's share our high threat cases with them so they know what looks like what, and it's not ours. So that's an old issue that they co-opted there.
That's a big deal. It shows the behind the scenes struggle for the control of this narrative and the control of the technology, and where it's all, coming to pass now. It's like how you said before, how now Trump is actually rushing this. Obama mentions on his podcast that he's going to talk about it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then so he's like, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do something. And then Trump's like, no, I'm doing something.
Yes.
So there is something going on behind the scenes. And I think you were right when you said, well, it looks like they're just throwing things out there.
Yeah.
And then they're reading the response, and they're trying to create a operation live as we go to do what works for them. So now it's the biologics. Before it was like, you know, the focus was on the threat, and you've got drones over New Jersey, and you've got all this stuff going on. And then now, so they're doing all these different things, and they're just figuring out, okay, well, how can we do what we need to do, whatever that is.
Oh, the drone swarms, completely unexplained. How much data mining did they get from that? How much testing the public did they get from that? Oh, there are drones hovering over your house and you can't do anything about it.
Hovering over the president's home, military bases. Oh my God, the balloon, the balloon that was just sailing. Just sailing over America like nobody cares. Like the weirdest.
It is. I mean, we're just going to let it go by. And you know what? Our sensors, we weren't set up for balloons. So this whole time, the Russians, you know, we were in a Cold War all that time. All they had to do was sink a balloon with a nuke in it, and we would have been toast, I guess.
It's honestly, it
doesn't weird. Make sense. And I'll tell you, the people who are saying it in that case was the top COG commander. So this is somebody with incredible knowledge. You know, he knows all about it. He's the head of NORAD. He's not going to make a mistake like that. You know, of course we had programs for balloons. And I'm glad you mentioned the balloon, because that kicked off the aerial exercises to test for the whole sky event thing, which I think is in the working. You have said yourself, and I want to put this on the record, you know, you have told me at times in envisioning things that somehow, you know, they're working on something in relation to the sky and maybe over a public event, for example. Now, I don't want to put you in the position of making predictions and things like that. But I just want to say it is an interesting kind of wave that you tap into there with that.
I had seen it, like it would just sort of like pop into my mind. Some kind of UFO experience over, I was always one of two things. It was either, I think it was football or baseball.
Baseball stadium. Yeah.
And I remember seeing it, I think it was like 2023 or something. It was years ago. I think it was years ago. And then we started working on it. And then it was like the Satchel Paige thing came out about there being weird baseball steganography with space and space operations, and that like baseball is actually a Masonic game. It was created by Freemasonry, representing kind of Freemasonic concepts. It's a great sport, but it has these kind of occult theosophical roots to it. And yeah, I did see like a game and then something coming from the sky, like an event or something coming from the sky, but that it would be completely fake and created, but they wanted to use this moment where everybody was focused on the same place, in the same place, kind of like they do a Super Bowl sometimes. But like that, it's like a ritual for them. These games are rituals. And for some reason, the weird thing about it that I still don't understand is I also associated it with like underground stuff underneath the arena, I think. Like there was something about the underground too that was connected to it, but I'd never understood. Because when you're getting a vision, you just see something and it's fragments. It's very rare that you get like an entire thing and you can interpret it's sort of like, it's very chaotic. So I did see something with the underground as well. And I also did see July 4th. I think we talked about that as well, as a potential date for it, as a potential for this to happen.
Now, I thought that is so unusual. They've been touting this Brazilian psychic. This is only in the last week. Saying, oh yeah, there's a soccer thing on July 4th and aliens are going to grab the players or something. And I was like, isn't that strange? It's like a caricature of the same thing that you're tuning into. And we've talked about this in the background literally for years, like you've talked about. That, to me, is quite fascinating. But I also, you know, the idea that they need an event to set off a series of protocols for emergency powers and things like that They're going to need the big major tests. And of course, when they had the Phoenix Lights in March of 1997 now, and the Phoenix Lights are these craft that just sit over that city, there's a testing protocol that took place back then, and they decided for one reason or another, okay, we had a certain amount of information from this, but we're not going to try the hardcore piece there. And you get 9/11 a few years later. I always thought that was interesting because you're bringing in emergencies one way or another. If the alien thing's not ready, we have other things to work with. But now I think they feel, and they're getting advice, that the UFO threat aspect and the continuity of government piece is more viable. And that's why when you're getting flashes around sporting events and stadium events, that I can't help but have us mention it here and go on the record about it.
And it's interesting too, because one of the things that has always kind of been obscured is that whenever they do these sort of sky events, whether it be like the balloon or the drones or whatever it is, it's always obscure. So they never say it's aliens, and there's always this potential that it's China or Russia or whatever.
Yes.
So it sort of allows them to either say this is aliens, or it allows them to say that this is Russia or Iran now, or whatever else it is. So now they always keep it really obscure. And that's part of this too, is there could be something that goes on and they could really take it either way, but it could still create an emergency power situation. So.
Gigi, just fascinating information and insight. Your work here on YouTube as Gigi Young and at gigiyoung.com. We'll have you back on here shortly for a very special episode coming up. Please join us every Friday night at 8 p.m. for the Dark Journalist X series. See you soon.